All right, thank you everybody for being here this afternoon for our Lunch and Learn today. This is a really exciting topic that I'm glad that all of you could join us for. We'll be talking today about local government and the environment, and specifically township forms of government and the environment. I think that there are so many things that units of local government can do, and fewer people are needed to put pressure to make sure that we're doing the right thing to protect the environment. So I'm really excited about this topic. And we have two different township supervisors here with us today, Gail and Shiva, who are from New Trier, and I'm not remembering Northfield, New Trier and Northfield Township, and Representative Daniel Didech, who is the state representative, one of the state representatives from Lake County, and a huge champion of environmental issues. And they're going to talk with us today. We also, if you need anything during this as well, I've got Brian Gill from my staff who's on. You should feel free to message either of us for any technical issues. For those of you getting continuing legal education, I'm going to pop the sign in the chat and just fill that out with your ARDC number, etc. I'll put that in a couple more times because we do expect to have a few more people join us. But thank you so much for your attendance, and really looking forward to this workshop today. So I think I will hand it over to the panel to present on this topic. And I guess also feel free to put questions in the chat at any time. We'll take questions at the end though, and I will moderate some questions. I'll have some if you all don't have any, but if you have questions, please put them in the chat. So I think y'all are co-hosts. If you want to go ahead and start the presentation. Thank you so much. Well, and actually, why don't you all introduce yourselves first? And I don't know, Gail, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Gail Schnitzer Eisenberg. I was just elected supervisor in New Trier Township this past April, started in May. But I spent 4 years as a trustee in New Trier Township. And during the day, I am, and late at night, I'm also a employee side civil rights attorney. I have my own shop with my husband and a partner called Loftus and Eisenberg, primarily doing sexual harassment, discrimination, and retaliation work. And I have 2 kids and live in Wilmette.
Thanks, Gail. Shiva, you want to go ahead?
Hi, I'm Shiva Mohsenzadeh. I was recently elected as Northfield Township Supervisor, and before that I served 4 years as a trustee in Northfield Township. My other job that I'm just rolling off of is, or has been being Chief of Staff to State Senator Laura Fine. And I'm also I was a corporate and securities lawyer, and I live in Glenview, and I have with my husband and my 2 boys.
And Representative Didech?
Yes, thanks, Jen. I'm Dan Didech. I am the state representative for the 59th district, which includes central Lake County, a little bit of northern Cook County. I'm also a local government attorney. I work as an attorney at Delgado Law Group, where we represent several dozen units of local government. I'm also a former township supervisor myself. Before I was a state representative, I was the Vernon Township supervisor. So I was very pleased to hear Jen say that she was excited to hear this presentation, because we don't hear that very often, that people are excited to hear about townships, but it's something that I know me and Gail and Shiva are all very passionate about. So this will be hopefully an interesting presentation for everybody.
Thanks. Yeah, we're expecting all the life hacks to working with township government. So if you want to go ahead and share your screen, your co-host, you should be ready to go.
Great. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and then we will get started. Okay, and let me try to start the presentation. Okay, Gail or Shiva, does this look correct to everybody? I'm getting thumbs up. So, okay, so this is our presentation, Townships Presenting the Environment and Public Health. We will jump right in. So first, what even is a township? A township is one of the oldest forms of local government in Illinois. They came into existence in about 1850. They're also the most numerous unit of local government in Illinois. There's over 1,400 townships. Nearly every county in Illinois is subdivided into different townships. They are governed by a group of elected officials. The township board consists of 4 trustees and 1 supervisor, who is also the chief executive of the township. There's also a number of other elected officials who perform certain duties. There's a highway commissioner, the township assessor, the township clerk. Some townships have a collector, and they all work together to accomplish the different responsibilities of a township. So what can a township do? And this is important when we're talking about, how can we protect the environment? How can we protect public health? Everything a township does has to come from some sort of legal authorization, right? They are not a sovereign entity. They are creations of the state of Illinois. So what a township does is, as a non-home rule unit of government, townships are subject to what is called Dillon's rule. And Dillon's rule says that units of local government possess only those powers expressly granted or incident to those expressly granted, and powers indispensable to the accomplishment of its declared objects and purpose. So in short, that means that a township can only do what the state of Illinois tells it that it could do. That's how most units of local government in Illinois operate, with the exception of home rule units, and that is some municipalities and a very small number, I think only 1 county, there may be 2 now, but it's a very small number. Home rule units of governments, it's the opposite. They could do anything they want unless the state tells them they can't. A non-home rule unit of government can do nothing except what the state tells it they could do. So in order to look at what a township's able to do, we have to look at state statute, and we'll start with the 3 mandatory functions of the township. These are the 3 things that every township, with some exceptions, but basically every township in Illinois must do. Number 1 is general assistance. This is the most basic form of financial welfare that we provide in Illinois. If people meet certain financial requirements and certain other qualifications, then townships provide cash assistance to some of the poorest and neediest people within their townships. This is a program that's overseen by the supervisor, and the elected supervisor is responsible for general assistance in townships. The other mandatory function is property assessment. Every property in Illinois is required to pay property taxes. One of the parts of the equation to determine how much property you pay is how much your property is worth. So the local township assessors outside of Cook County, in Cook County it's a little different, but outside of Cook County, the township assessor is responsible for determining how much your property is worth for property tax assessment purposes. In Cook County, it's done by the countywide elected official, but outside of Cook County, the township assessor has that responsibility. And also road maintenance. In most townships, there's an elected highway commissioner who is responsible for maintaining a number of the roads in the unincorporated areas of the township. In Cook County and Lake County and some of the collar counties, this is getting a little less common, as we've seen some consolidations between townships and road districts. So we don't always have an elected highway commissioner anymore. Sometimes it's the township supervisor who's responsible for maintaining the roads. But in most townships, there is still an elected highway commissioner who has that responsibility. But now we will get to what is kind of the fun part of the presentation. That's the permissive functions of a township. If you look at the township code, and I know Gail had told me she printed out the entire township code, so she has a big stack of it somewhere. It's a very, very long statute with a whole host of permissive powers of a township. And to me, this is one of the best parts of the township. We are, in each township is very different, right? And we're very nimble. We are able to respond to the unique needs of our community because of these permissive functions. And I included a graphic that you can see that we just put forth in Vernon Township about our food pantry and some of the items that we need for our food pantry this summer. And running a food pantry is one of the permissive functions of a township, right? A township is not required to operate a food pantry, but we are authorized by state statute to do so if we want to. So that is one of the things we can do. As far as protecting the environment, and Gail and Shiva, feel free to jump in if one of these is relevant to what you were planning to talk about. There's a whole host of statutes that grant permissive powers to townships that they can use either directly or indirectly to improve the environment within their township. They can require land to preserve as open space, acquire and maintain parkland, maintain cemeteries, operate wells, waterworks, and sewage systems, oversee garbage, recycling collection and disposal, clean up weeds, grass, trees, and other nuisances, address unsafe and abandoned buildings, regulate livestock and poultry within the township, address trees, leaves, and brush that are near highways, and mosquito abatement, which is a big portion of every township. It conduct advisory referendum to learn about what the voters of the township is important to them and what they want their township government to do. And also there's broad powers to provide disaster relief in certain circumstances. This may be a good time. I don't know if Shiva or Gail, if you want to jump in. I know some of these are quite relevant to your townships. Do you want to jump in and kind of elaborate on some of your favorites on this list?
Sure. Let's start with the food pantry. So if we could go to the next slide. So, the food pantry obviously, could be seen as non-environmental, but I think it is important for townships to consider it part of their environmental, prerogative. So we recently brought in a partnership with Go Green Winnetka, had a green audit of our building in our food pantry processes. So one thing that we were concerned about with Go Green was food waste and food ending up in landfills rather than being composted. So now Go Green Winnetka had been coming in and taking any food waste, including expired foods, cleaning out emptying them out, cleaning out the containers, recycling the containers, and composting any food that we cannot no longer give to our clients. We've also been discussing expiration dates and simply the concept of how long after a best by date can we give our food to our clients, and how to best communicate to our residents the safety of food past those dates to avoid that additional food waste. Beyond that, any other concepts in the pantry that either of you wanted to kind of elucidate on?
I was going to say, so our pantry is client choice. At least it was before the pandemic. We're looking into opening up again for that, which means that people come and with their carts and walk around aisles, almost like a grocery store, and pick things that they know they're gonna eat. Our township is very diverse. So people have, we have Polish, Hispanic, Mongolian, Korean, Russian. We just have a big variety of ethnic groups that live in the township, and everyone's tastes are different. Not everyone's going to like mac and cheese or boxed potatoes. So providing that client choice is very important in avoiding food waste. And it's our food pantry has almost been what our township government is known for, and it's been award-winning. And if no one knows anything about our township, everyone will know about the Northfield Township Food Pantry, everyone who lives in the township. And there are things, having just taken over, there are things that I want to address. It's issues that, as a food pantry, we get a lot of boxes, and apparently our building doesn't provide box recycling. So we are lucky to have a highway commissioner in our township that has a great recycling program that I will talk a bit later, but I've talked to him about picking up our big boxes because I hate those going to waste. And a lot of the local grocery stores make donations to our food pantry. And that's another thing that avoids waste. Our local farmers markets, we go at the end of every farmers markets. We have volunteers who go and pick up leftover produce that hasn't been bought. So again, avoiding waste and having, things ending up in landfills, food ending up in landfills. And now during COVID that we're not doing client choice, because obviously we don't want the traffic in our relatively small pantry. People call and we get the list of items that they want. We prepared for them in bags, and we take it outside to them in their parking garage, and we tell them if there's anything, look through the bags, and if there's like any items that you won't use, just leave it in the bag and we'll take it. Again, just doing measures to avoid food ending up in landfills.
And interestingly, actually, during that experiment in pre-packed bags during COVID, at least for us, we found that we were getting rid of less produce. We were more able to buy produce for the proper amount of clients when it wasn't during food choice. So certainly that cost benefit analysis between the dignity of food choice and shopping through the food pantry. And these pictures are our storage areas, not our pantry itself. So you have to kind of do an analysis on which one or how you can balance those to maximize both dignity and your environmental responsibility. So beyond the pantries, a lot of townships do a number of collection drives. So this is an example. This is New Trier Township's partnership with the Volunteer Center. And we do a very large Make a Difference Day drive, keeping items out of landfills. So various nonprofit organizations are set up along the train stations, and people drive right through and stop at each station to drop off goods. So there's a section for children's toys, a section for books, a section for dresses, a section for all sorts of things, of sports equipment, to make sure that they can be reused, either through recycling, so like a binary heart, which would reuse electronics, or used even in our own community, and either resold or being donated to either our pantry or to a resale shop, things like that. So we are able to do a lot of those programs in the township, despite at least New Trier not having much of our own land. So we have to partner with a lot of the municipalities. If you want to go to the next slide as well, just from additional kind of collections that we've been doing on the environmental side, we are very proud of our partnership with Bernie's Book Bank. We have been able to collect a pretty ridiculous amount of books at this point through no contact drives, even during COVID. We were the first township to make these no contact drives. We also used that same model with Chicago Housewares, the Chicago Furniture Bank, in order to collect items that could be reused and were used then for people who were experiencing housing insecurity to set up new homes. We were able to furnish 200 homes. Upcoming, of course, our paper shredding event, where we're able to take documents and safely recycle them to ensure not only the privacy of residents, but also that they are being dealt with in an environmentally friendly way. So I know our township makes that a priority, and I'm sure that both Shiva and Daniel can speak about other townships and how they make use of those kinds of systems as well.
So as I mentioned, in Northfield Township, we have a road district. So Northfield Township includes mainly the village of the village of Glenview and the village of Northbrook and village of Northfield, on obviously all the unincorporated areas. So the unincorporated areas, we do have an elected highway commissioner who services the roads in those areas. And we also have a sewer district dealing with the sewer systems. And the sewer district is under the Northfield Township, under my purviews, under the supervisors. So one of the great things that our road district does, besides maintaining roads, is a big recycling program. And obviously it costs us it costs the road district to provide this recycling service, but they have a large property where they can really have be able to handle monthly shredding events, which they host, and the traffic just nonstop, and they fill at least 1 or 2 trucks with their paper shredding. And they also accept, and I'm going to read this list of items because it is amazing what they accept and what we keep out of landfills: art supplies, batteries of all types, bikes and toys, cardboard, cell phones, pagers, clothing, computer hardware, not except monitors, electronics, engine oil, eyeglasses, fluorescent tubes, bulbs, ink toner cartridges, metal, styrofoam, tires, transmission fluid, flags, because we want to dispose of our flags in a respectful manner, small electronics, therapeutic equipment like standards, crutches, walkers, wheelchairs, and household paint, oil, and latex. And they have a way of, if they can, for example, with metal, if they can sell it, they will. And if not, they have a way of putting the items they recycle, either to reuse it or resell it, or recycle it in a environmentally friendly way. And that's a very huge service that they provide that's very valued by the township residents. And as I was saying with the paper shredding, we have monthly paper shredding which started in April, going all the way through October.
So what's interesting is Representative Didech, I should say, had mentioned that not every township has a roads district. So New Trier Township has not had a road district since the 1960s, when the duties were taken over by other entities. But they do still exist, and they can be very helpful to addressing environmental concerns across the state. Many of us are members of Township Officials of Illinois, and certainly that organization, when they kind of an umbrella association of township officials, has made a huge effort to address monarch butterfly preservation, and made it so that many townships do offer milkweed seeds at their facilities, and have made an effort to plant those native plants throughout their highway districts, which is, as Representative Didech mentioned, is one of the permissive functions that a township can do, is to address plantings near highways. But there is a movement to consolidate road districts, whether or not with the townships themselves or with other entities. Representative Didech, did you want to mention anything about that in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, so a few things. First, you can call me Dan, that's fine. So in Vernon Township, we actually consolidated our road district with our township. And basically what that means is we don't elect a highway commissioner anymore. And it's now the supervisor and the township board who are responsible for overseeing the roads in our township. We thought, the different structures of government are right for different areas. And we thought that was right for us. I'm glad that Gail brought up about how some road districts are planting milkweed on their road district properties, because that was something I was going to talk about in a different context, which is interesting because at Vernon Township, we plant milkweed on at our parkland. So, that is something we can do. Townships, we have a small footprint in a lot of ways, but we can do things that can have a much bigger impact, like planting milkweed, which is something that is very good for our local ecosystems on a bigger scale as well. The slide we're on now, advisory referendums, that's an interesting tool that townships have to kind of determine public opinion and what they're going to talk about. So I know, Shiva, you had a experience with advisory referendums recently. Do you want to kind of talk about that?
Right. And I did want to mention, speaking of milkweed, our township has a tree planting program too. So again, these are just the different measures we can do in each township to help with the environment. So moving on to the slide, one of the other roles of townships is with respect to ballot referendums, people can either collect signatures to get a referendum on the ballot, or they can attend a town meeting, which happens once or twice in a township with the Board of Township Government, where they can introduce to put a ballot referendum on the ballot by the vote of, the town meeting is open to the public. All township board meetings are open to the public, but this one is specifically so that matters such as this can come before the township. And people put these, we had the same advisory ballot. You can see there was an organization that introduced this ballot advisory question in several of the township town meetings. This is Niles's. The same language was introduced or offered in Northfield Township town meeting a few months ago. And in town meetings, the supervisor and the board, they vote as residents, not as a township board. And their vote is counted the same way as the vote of everyone in attendance. And this is a good example of what good planning and good advocacy can achieve. In Niles Township, the same ballot advisory was introduced, and in New Trier Township, it was introduced and it passed. In Northfield Township, it brought in a certain climate denying individuals, people who don't believe in government's involvement, very pro-business and didn't believe in government's involvement in the environment. And they attended the town meeting and they voted it down. So it's important that when you do things like this, or the organizations that present these, that they do their homework and they make sure that their advocates are attending these meetings to support these important environmental issues. In our township, definitely the majority are in favor of environment, and I would call us a green township. But again, they weren't present when this referendum was introduced and it failed. So that is where advocacy becomes a very important, doing advocacy the right way becomes a very important issue.
So as Shiva mentioned, we did also have the same referenda was put before our electors. I think that the annual town meeting for townships is probably one of the most exciting things in the year. In a local government nerd way, it's really one of the few opportunities where residents get a chance to be a part of the government directly. It's direct democracy. And it's got some very cute historical layovers that are fun. But it's really wonderful that that any elector, any resident who's registered to vote in that township can bring up an issue of public policy for consideration. So ours did pass. It only needed a majority of the electors to get onto the ballot. And in almost everybody, pretty much everybody at the town meeting who was there, in contrast to Shiva, were in favor of the public policy referenda. And because it's really just a matter of getting the issue of public policy on the ballot, I think no one was trying to make any kinds of arguments for or against the actual merits during that process. That comes after, and that I think is an interesting limitation on what townships can and cannot do in this area. Because while a referenda could be an interesting tool towards environmentalism at the township level, the government itself has to be very careful about what they do. So townships cannot expend any public funds to urge any elector to vote for or against any candidate or proposition. And the election code specifically permits public bodies to use public funds to disseminate just factual information relative to that proposition appearing on an election ballot. So we had to be very careful about what we could and couldn't say regarding this particular proposition that was going on our ballot. Our League of Women Voters and our library did put together a program, but the township itself could not take a stand other than saying this is the language of the proposition, and you should find information regarding the pros and cons. But we could not take our own position, even though other organizations could. So, given we saw 66% voting in favor of that referenda, it's obviously directed towards federal policy, but I do think that it was a a mandate to the township government to make environmentalism a priority in the coming years. And that's how I interpreted it.
Great. So before we get to our next section where we have a list of some of the township powers for public health, there was one other issue that I wanted to talk about a little bit from the previous list of environmental powers, and that is the maintenance of cemeteries, because this is something that I've always found very interesting and something that I think that people don't really think about that often, but it's an interesting public policy question of what happens when somebody abandons a cemetery. Obviously, if a cemetery is non-maintained and left in disrepair, that can have some potentially negative public health and environmental consequences for the surrounding area. So what the legislature has put into statute is that townships are the government of last resort for maintaining cemeteries. So if a cemetery becomes abandoned, the township then can step in and either take ownership of the cemetery itself and make sure it's being operated in a way that does not create a threat to the public, or the township can then shepherd the cemetery to a different organization who can then do what needs to be done to make sure that the cemetery is being maintained. I always thought that that's an interesting thing that townships are also responsible for.
And we actually had this come up a couple of years ago when a cemetery in Northfield Township, the church that was associated with it and was doing the upkeep of that cemetery, was basically dissolved, and it fell on us to all of a sudden take care of that. And not having been in the business of taking care of cemeteries before, we were kind of scratching our heads and looking at the property and looking at people who were buried there and how long ago. And, there were people who had been buried, who were buried there 50, 100 years ago, and someone who, their family had bought a plot and they're buried there in the 2000s. So it became very difficult to figure out what to do with it. And before we had to think too hard about it, someone stepped in, someone from one of the members of the public, and agreed to take on the upkeep of that cemetery. But the issue does come up, and it's very interesting that it's one of the many roles that fall on townships that people don't realize and appreciate.
Yeah, so let's jump into some other things that townships are authorized to do. They can establish and operate a hospital. Most don't, but I think there are a small number in our state that do operate hospitals. Provide ambulance and primary care services in some of our smaller townships. That happens more often in the downstate area too, where there aren't municipalities or counties that have those capabilities. Provide services for people with developmental disabilities. That's something that we do in Vernon Township. One of the things that we do is we support a number of agencies that provide those services. We have a grant making process to make sure that the resources are there to make sure people in our community with developmental disabilities are taken care of. Fund mental health services, same thing as the previous item. Provide youth services and senior services. In Vernon Township, we have a swimming pool, and we provide swimming lessons to young people in our area, which certainly has a public health component to that. Operate food pantries, which we've talked about before. And Gail, do you want to jump in about some of the things that Nutrier is doing on the public health front?
Sure. Public health was really one of the original goals of township government. Looking through our historical records, some of the earliest things that at least Nutrier Township did was, to address various pandemics as they came through. So, public health was always very important, or, even burying animals or fumigating houses. But yes, so we used to have our own township health officer. That became obsolete when Cook County Health Department became a health district, and when the municipalities entered into voluntary agreements with the county to provide those agreements. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a role for townships within that county as far as encouraging public health for our residents. So obviously that came into stark relief during the COVID pandemic. In addition to doing everything we could as far as emergency financial and food services to those who were detrimentally impacted by the pandemic, we were partnering with our municipalities in order to offer, to help find vaccinations for those who needed them, starting first with our most vulnerable populations, our senior citizens. The high school and the municipalities were amazing in setting up one of the first kind of pop-up clinics that we were then able to use pretty much every week to offer these clinics. After senior citizens, we also offered youth clinics as well to make sure that residents within the township were getting their vaccinations. And I believe New Trier Township is at, I think it's certainly much higher than most of the suburban Cook County and much higher than the state as far as our vaccination rates, because certainly pathogens do not stay within municipal boundaries. So that was one of the most important things I think that we were able to do in the past year. As we every program we did during the pandemic, we tried to make sure that residents were aware of these vaccination clinics. So as we were collecting furniture, for instance, for the Chicago Furniture Bank, I asked every resident if they needed help finding COVID vaccinations during a period where it was difficult to find such programs for our seniors. We were able to help some of those residents to obtain their vaccinations or quicker. But yes, there are a few townships that do offer more fulsome, do still have health departments, for instance, but I don't believe that is the norm anymore in Illinois.
Yes, so in Vernon Township, during the early part of the pandemic last year, one of the things we did on a similar note is we did mask giveaways. We were able to secure thousands of free masks that were donated from a couple different corporations in the area, and we were able to distribute free masks to people in our community, which was something that was very beneficial about a year ago when the pandemic was just getting started. It was a very scary time, and it was a good service we were able to provide to people. Shiva, did you have anything you wanted to add on public health initiatives?
No, but I kind of wanted to make a general point that township, as Representative Didech mentioned, is the oldest form of government in Illinois. And as the state has developed, townships they're not a one size fits all kind of model. There are parts of Illinois where township may be the only form of government around 4 miles. So because of that, they may need to offer more services than townships in our area and in Gail's area and in my area and the northern suburbs of Chicago, which are blessed with a lot of services and not-for-profit organizations and pretty good public health structures in place. And there were places like Evanston. Evanston Township was coterminous with city of Evanston, and they were able to legislatively basically eliminate their township without any disruption in services because the village boundaries and township boundaries were identical. So because of that, for example, where some townships may need to have their public health departments, or some townships may need to provide youth services or senior services directly, we in our area, one of the things that we do is we give money we have a grant program where we give money to the human service organizations in our area that provide these services, who are generally better at it. So in our area, we have North Shore Senior Center, Youth Services, just all these other not-for-profits that do a great job, and we fund them annually through grants, and that's how they sustain their services and serve our residents.
That's a good point to kind of emphasize that a lot of those permissive powers of a township government, things like mosquito abatement, for instance, that could be useful in many areas to address environmental concerns and public health with West Nile. at least in New Trier Township, we're covered by a mosquito abatement district, separate, a special taxing district. So that's not a function that the township needs to take on, even if it is a permissive power. Similarly, other parkland, we don't own any parkland in New Trier Township, finding that our park districts are able to do that function. So it certainly, it is a nimble form of government. It's a way for the people to really participate and to address the needs of those communities, but recognizing that environmental concerns, public health concerns do not just stop at the borders of a township or a municipality.
So I think we've come to the end of our formal presentation. So Jen, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add or if there's any questions, but I think that we've reached the end of our PowerPoints.
Great.
I
Thank you
did
so
just
much.
want to add one quick thing about while Township may not have a lot of direct authority to pass laws or do things that are, because of Dillon's rule, one thing I'd like to emphasize is partnerships that we can have with other units of local government, with our state rep, with our state senators, with our villages, about taking measures, environmental measures, to protect the health and safety of our public and our environment. One thing that I'd like to work on, for example, is I'd like to work with our county commissioner about passing a coal tar sealant ban. Some municipalities in our township have already done it, but it would be the state law was just passed that at least if coal tar sealant is used, which is a carcinogenic substance, that they need to post about it, letting the public know that they've just used carcinogenic sealant on the driveways. But I would like to work with the county to see about just banning it in Cook County. And these are the different partnerships that we can do together to advance some of the environmental measures we'd like to see.
Cool. Thank you, Shiva. I'm happy to take questions in the chat, but I think that I would like to start with one. Just because, Dan, I noticed in your presentation, you were talking about that case at the beginning, it's the Pesticide Public Policy Foundation versus the Village of Wakanda. I just wondered if maybe you could go into a little bit more of what happened in that case, because I read it and I was like, this is actually really interesting and relevant to environmental protection.
I will be perfectly honest, Jen. I only read the portion of that case that that was relevant to the Dillon's rule. So you might be a better resource to get into the nuts and bolts of that case. I think we may have lost Jen though, but when she comes back, maybe we can talk more about that one, because I'm not familiar with the underlying facts of that case.
My internet is being unstable right now. But I'll just, when I, just in reviewing it, it was about the Village of Wakanda and the township government prohibiting pesticide usage, which we have a preemption on pesticide regulation by local governments under state law. So I just thought it was interesting.
Absolutely. And I know that our League of Women Voters is very active in that area right now. And I've been trying to figure out how I can partner with them, because it's not always, some of this is soft power. But there were some other cases that came up while I was preparing for this program that I thought were interesting. Just of various ways that townships have intervened in matters to try to represent their township residents' interests in environmental cases. They've tried to use these various federal statutes in order to try to gain standing and fight against, what would be noxious or otherwise detrimental policies or practices. And usually those efforts have not been particularly successful. But I did find one case that I thought was interesting, this Bradford matter, where though the federal statutes did not provide any cause of action for the township to have standing under, the court did mention that perhaps if there was an Open Meetings Act violation, the township could bring some sort of an objection to what was going to be a pretty environmentally detrimental practice by a local company.
Cool. Thank you. I also saw Representative Williams. Do you just want to ask your question? I know you just typed it in the chat.
Yeah, so I see Ann's question in the chat. Are there any efforts to update the township code to reflect changing priorities such as the environment or others which are currently included among township powers? And the answer is yes and no. So, when we're talking about the environment in general, I think the best response for environmental issues are usually larger solutions, right? I think, pollution doesn't know where the borders of townships are, as they don't know where the borders of states are. So I think the best response for most environmental issues are usually at the federal or the state level. That being said, I think there's lots of opportunities for us to update statutes to give townships more authority to regulate environmental issues. And the one that was brought up, I think by Gail, the coal tar sealant issue, that may be something that we should be looking into as well. I know that there's, if we're unable to pass a statewide ban on the use of coal tar sealant, maybe a second best option is to authorize more local governments to take that action within their area. So if we can't do as big of an impact as we want, hopefully we can work with our local government partners and, at least make some progress on those types of issues.
Right, and I agree with you. Obviously, ideally, if we can pass the statewide ban, that would be the best solution. However, when you're dealing with strong lobbying from the chemical industry, which makes passing the coal tar sealant an uphill battle. I know Senator Fine has been working on that since she was a representative, so for 8 years. I mean, Jen knows about it as well. It's the more local governments you get joining in the fight by banning it locally, the easier it gets to fight the industry and get to the point of being able to pass it statewide. So it just, when you can't go straight to the big measure, starting small locally at least is helping some, and giving more backing and support to pass the bigger measure later on. So that's I would love to get townships more power in those environmental areas. So it's something that, thank you, Representative Williams, for that question, because it's something that we can definitely talk to our elected officials about.
Okay, so Jennifer Van Wee in the comments had asked, do townships work with county soil and water conservation districts? And maybe you could answer a little bit more about water overall. I know Shiva had talked a little bit about some of the drainage, but how do we protect water?
Because we have a sewer district, I know that we work closely with MWRD, and we have to report to them about what, and we have to follow their standards about our sewers. And I believe, I don't know if it's an annual report that we need to file with them, and also all our sewers annually, and they need to get checked and follow certain guidelines that are set forth by MWRD. And for those who may not be from this area, MWRD is the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, and they are responsible for basically cleaning out our stormwaters before they let it loose into our rivers. It's a great governmental unit that gets visitors from all over the world. What they do to keep Lake Michigan and our waterways clean is really amazing.
Right. I mean, certainly we don't have our public wells anymore. Water treatment, these are permissible powers that at least we don't exercise any authority under for New Trier Township. So Interestingly, New Trier Township is what's called a fractional township, that much of our property is actually in the lake. So I guess that makes us important water conservationists in that sense. Obviously, if we had a roads district, we would be much more interested in things like permeability, but we can, make efforts to encourage green practices in those organizations that we are funding.
Great, thank you. I think we answered a little bit this, but I don't know if folks want to add what is going on currently with townships and managing flooding. What are the environmental impacts of the tools that townships are using to prevent flooding?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and especially in townships that have a number of unincorporated neighborhoods, the townships can have a pretty significant role in helping manage flooding. So in Vernon Township, what we do when there's heavy rains and there's a flooding risk, our highway department actually fills up delivers sandbags to those homes, so they can place those sandbags in a way that will help prevent their homes from flooding. Another thing that we do is we ensure that new proposed developments in some of those unincorporated areas that are under our jurisdiction are in compliance with the current best practices and regulations, to make sure that the new developments aren't pursued in a way that will exacerbate some of the flooding problems that we're having. I think like a lot of issues, municipalities and the county play a bigger role just because they cover a broader territory and they have more resources. But the townships, in the kind of the small areas that we are responsible for, that's certainly something that comes up regularly, and it's something that we do the best we can to help mitigate those flooding issues.
Cool.
In our township in Northfield, because we do have unincorporated areas, the zoning and permits, as far as building permits, all of that fall within Cook County. But going back to our sewers and our drainage, so when during heavy rains, everyone, especially in unincorporated areas, know to contact the township if there's a manhole or the drainage holes, and I don't know all the technical terms, that are clogged and it's not draining properly. Our highway district immediately is out there cleaning those up, making sure that the flooding, to prevent flooding. Also, we certainly do have areas that are prone to flooding. There's one particular area that floods all the time, and some of it is because of the older infrastructure, where the drainage pipes underground are just too big, too small to handle the amount of rain that they've been getting. The 100-year rains have become more frequent because of climate change, and obviously the mega mansions that people built, that people are building now, that just contributes to the problem. So it is all part of the bigger picture of flooding that's gotten worse, I believe, all over the state. And in our township, it's an expensive. It's going to be an expensive problem to address, but it's going in and changing those drainage pipes that were built 50 years ago, that are not built now to handle the amount of rain and the sudden and dump of rain that we get in a very short time. So that's a big expense that I'm going to look into, just again partnering with Cook County and WRD, different organizations that help on these issues, so that as a bigger group we can handle some of it, but it's a big problem.
Great. We have Sarah from Normal Township wrote, I know this is more of a comment, but we worked with the Illinois Solar for All program to get a solar array on our senior center. It's currently the largest array in the area, and county officials have been encouraged to pursue the program for their buildings now. So that's really neat. And then I'll just add another comment from Daniela. If the panel wants to respond to either of these, the state urban and community forester wondered if a township could set up an advisory board for forestry or a forestry management plan. And if so, he can find funding for townships to start this. So I don't know, anything on solar or on forestry you want to comment on?
Well, on the forestry management plan and a potential advisory board, that's something very interesting. That's something I haven't heard about before. So, Daniela, if you want to try to get in touch offline, that's certainly something we can try to work on, because I think that's something that a lot of townships would probably be interested in, and certainly, absolutely, we should try to find a way to make that happen. Or if we need a state statute to authorize those sorts of advisory boards, that's something we can work on as well. So let's certainly continue a conversation about that, because I think that's a great idea.
And that's really inspiring regarding the solar power, and certainly something that I'm going to want to look at myself. So I appreciate you putting that in the chat, since we do own our building and it gets pretty good sun.
Yeah, I've taken down some notes just from listening to everyone, new measures and things that I want to do in our township. So thank you. It's been very educational for us as well.
All right, well, I mean, we're at 12:56, so I don't know if there are any closing thoughts from our panel.
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you everyone for attending and for the good questions.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And I will one last time, because you got to put, although the panelists, I will get you all teacher certificates, but you got to put your info in here for CLE if you would like. And if you'd like continuing the legal education, I know that's that time of year. We do have 2 more CLEs in our CLE series, including tomorrow, we're doing a piece on tackling water affordability through a justice lens. That 2 attorneys are going to speak about how to protect low-income customers and their right to water. So we're really excited about that one. So, you know, I'll please attend if you can. And otherwise, we will have this one recorded if you want to refer back to it later. I just think this is really an excellent presentation, and a lot of things that folks can learn about how to tackle these issues in their own local government. So thank you so much to our really excellent panel, and we will follow up with everybody with this PowerPoint. So again, thanks for joining, and everybody have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.